An estimated 20,000 people suffered from homelessness in Sacramento County in 2022. Nearly 100 of those have died since the point-in-time count was done in February of 2022. This does not mean that there are 100 less people immiserated on the streets of the county, people that are starving, in pain, freezing one night, or dying of heat exhaustion just months later. We know from past records and steady increases of our unhoused population over the past decade, as well as the current services being provided to what was once estimated to be 20,000, that there are staggeringly many more now in April of 2023. I aim to do a series of videos highlighting what is going on in the county and what can be done differently. This video is a jumping off point. I'll try to speak on the state of the county in regard to those suffering from homelessness, what the county government is doing, as well as what they are not doing. I'll then put out videos for what some of the cities and unincorporated parts of the county are like and what they are doing. Then I will provide videos for homeless people so they can know where help is and how to get it. And lastly, I'll provide videos and solutions that are not being implemented that could end this disgusting suffering and death. That 20,000 figure comes from the point-in-time count, or PIT. The PIT is done once every 2 years as part of fulfilling requirements from the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. All this information is publicly available. The count is typically done one night in January, but was delayed due to the pandemic. It should have occurred in January of 2021, but was pushed until February of 2022. It took 2 nights with hundreds of volunteers spread out across Sacramento County, counting and interviewing Sacramento County's residents that are suffering from homelessness. The gathered information is then compiled and analyzed, with some statistical manipulation done to account for estimates of the number of our unhoused neighbors in places where the counters could not get to. They found that there were 9,278 people that were homeless on that cold February night. This is a 67% increase over the 2019 count. This means that almost 6 of every 1,000 people in Sacramento that night were suffering from homelessness. 2,614 were in shelters, 6,644 were unsheltered. The unsheltered are those that were freezing in the February cold, in tents, makeshift tarp shelters, under awnings, in cars or RVs, or with nothing but blankets and a sleeping bag. Many of the 2,614 that did have indoor shelter were in hotels under voucher programs and other one-time funded programs that no longer have the same level of funding or any funding at all. Very few permanent shelter beds exist in Sacramento County in comparison to the number of those suffering and the number of temporary shelter options that gain and lose funding regularly. Sacramento County has long been focused on temporary solutions to a growing and seemingly permanent issue. The analysts of the PIT count found that there aren't just 9,278 unhoused people in Sacramento County. This was just on one night in February. They concluded that there were as many as 20,000 individual souls left unhoused throughout the year of 2022. 72% of those 20,000 do not sleep in any shelter that is deemed suitable for human habitation by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. 78% of our unhoused neighbors have been continuously homeless for more than a year. 59% have been continuously homeless since the last point-in-time count 3 years ago. Only 6% were found to have become homeless during the pandemic. The compilers of the PIT concluded that only 5% of our unhoused neighbors are from outside of the region. This is misleading. It would be more accurate to say that less than 5% of those suffering on the streets have reported to have been in the region less than 6 months. It is not the case that they are necessarily from Sacramento or any of the neighboring counties. The statistical data on where the respondents are originally from is self-reported and opaque. It seems as if the individual has been in the county for more than 6 months and doesn't report to have been here temporarily, they are then considered to be a long-term resident. Only 84% of those that self-reported as long-term residents actually report that one of their previous residences was in a local zip code. Of these 6,664 suffering in conditions not suitable for human habitation on that cold February night, 2,809 were in tents, 1,782 were in vehicles like cars or RVs, and 2,072 were in other conditions like just a tarp or blanket with no shelter above them. Of the 2,614 that were sheltered on that cold February night, 1,105 were in emergency shelters, 874 were in hotel programs, and 635 were in transitional programs. 1,105 people equates to 12% of the population of Sacramento citizens suffering from homelessness. This means that the county only had bed space on any given night for that few amount of people, and it's not much better a year later. Much of the 874 in hotels were there under a COVID-era program. It was found that 90% of the increase in the shelter homeless over the 2019 count was due to hotel and motel voucher programs that were one-time funds. Between 2019 and 2022, the transitional housing bed space increased from 531 to 635. This is an increase, but not enough. not even growing at the rate of increase in the homeless population. Sacramento County is comprised of a number of cities and unincorporated areas for the purpose of the pit count. The county is broken into the city of Sacramento, with 67% of the total of our unhoused neighbors, or 4,444, the American River Parkway with 8% at 594, Citrus Heights with 1% with 89, Rancho Cordova with 2% with 156, Elk Grove with 1% with 45, Folsom with 0.5% with 20, and the rest of the unincorporated county with 20% or 1,316. This is not all of the cities in Sacramento County. Cities like Galt and Isleton are not given their own statistics. Those suffering on the streets are of varied demographics such as age, race, gender, and disability status. 8% are under 18, 7% between 18 and 24, 14% between 25 and 34, 26% between 35 and 44, 21% between 45 and 54, 22% between 55 and 64, and 1% are older than 65. 65% report to be male, 33% report to be female, 1% report to be non-gender conforming, and 1% report to be transgender. 79% are individuals with no household members with them, 15% are families with children, 5% are unaccompanied youth, and 1% are adult couples. Those suffering on the streets have been suffering for varied amounts of time. 74% are considered long-term and continuously suffering from homelessness, 18% are considered to be episodic and moderately homeless, 6% are episodic and long-term homeless, and only 2% are short-term and recently homeless. Of the 9,278 that were counted, not all of those submit a survey or answer questions, or were actually counted as opposed to being assumed to have been somewhere. The statistics on things like time unhoused, gender, age, disabilities, and addiction are extrapolated from a small data set by those analyzing the pig count surveys from the few hundred surveys that are completed and legible. These estimates are just that, estimates. They are not exact, but are the best thing that we have to try to come to an understanding of the suffering and what needs to be done to alleviate it. At face value, there are some statistics that are obviously not correct, either by anecdotal observation or by what services are being used by those suffering from homelessness. Many of the homeless, 58%, report to have at least one disabling factor. 34% report a psychological condition like schizophrenia or PTSD. 32% report a physical disability. 30% report to have cognitive impairment. 24% report to having suffered a traumatic brain injury. Very few in comparison, 15%, self-report to being addicted to drugs or alcohol. Part of this is a self-reporting issue. Many addicts do not want to admit addiction or do not realize that they are addicted. The anecdotal evidence from many that live in the county and or interact with and aid those suffering from homelessness is that this 15% number for addiction is not correct, especially in the chronically homeless population. What is the county doing? The county has small shelters and even smaller and underfunded programs and services. The existing shelters are North A Street, Bannon Family Shelter, Next Move Family Shelter, Scattered Home Options, Mather Campus, and the Adolfo Transitional Housing Program. Right now, the county has max capacity of 649, but that is not open to everyone. Most of these shelter spaces are going to be for those in transitional programs and families. They are usually not open to the 65% of those suffering that identify as male, or the others that don't identify as either male or female. The county has sites off of Watt Avenue, East Parkway, and Florin Road that remain vacant, but with millions of dollars poured into them. Millions of dollars that seem to have been wasted. The max capacity for these 3 vacant sites is, at best, only a few hundred more. At the community meeting for the Florin Road location, it was claimed that the county planned on using small sheds, about the size of prison cells, as multi-person dwellings, which is unlikely to ever happen. The county wants to fit as many beds and programs as possible so they can start arresting those suffering from homelessness. The county put the sheds on the property on Florin Road months ago with a series of fences around the sheds. The sheds remain vacant. The sheds have been there, sitting vacant, long enough that the site has had to be re-fenced already. There are dozens of tents and vehicles outside of the fencing or within a quarter mile of the location with homeless people suffering, waiting for the location to open. This section of Florin Road is now a hotbed for homeless suffering, reckless driving, theft, and other crimes. The county wants to jail those suffering from homelessness, but they cannot arrest the county's unhoused neighbors unless there is a bed space for that individual and that individual refuses the bed space. This is due to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decision Martin v. Boise. In Martin v. Boise, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal held that it is illegal for the state to arrest campers unless a bed is offered to them. A service-resistant homeless person isn't going to bunk 4 people to a shed. They will resist, go to jail, and be out the next day, still suffering, without housing or any help they need to get out of the situation they are in. The sheds on Florin Road are a street-to-jail pipeline. There is no proposal of offering the necessary and meaningful services on location in these tiny home programs, which are again just sheds, not actual homes. Calling them tiny homes is propaganda to make them sound quaint and cute. This isn't Instagram or Pinterest, this is real life, and people are dying. From the figures and estimates given at the Florin meeting, it would cost about $64,000 per homeless person per year to get this site up and running, and this assumes that each shed will have multiple people sleeping in it. These programs, at their cheapest, if we were to provide a bed for every homeless person, would cost $593,792,000 per year. And again, this figure is for homeless programs that do not offer the necessary services for those that are chronically homeless to get out of the homelessness that they are in and end their suffering. If one doesn't assume there will be multiple people sharing a shed, that $593 million figure jumps up to $1,187,584,000 per year on beds and sheds, not necessary services. The county budget is $7.3 billion. They cannot spend between 1/12 and 1/6 of their budget every year on a program that doesn't end this suffering. It just provides a bed in an unsafe place that will breed drug use, drug crimes, theft, rape, and murder. The county government's plan as it stands now is to prolong suffering, not end it. They want to give a place to sleep so they can arrest those suffering, but not provide a place to get services needed to become housed and live a fulfilling life. The county's goal, with no real solid plan for it, is to have as many as 2,700 beds at some undefined time in the future. This is, of course, about 1/10 the amount needed to provide a bed to the count of last year. As I'm reading this, the county is actually downsizing some of its programs, and it's being reported that they are dumping 500 people from shelters that already exist. The count, if done today, might be over 22,000, not 9,278. The county's plan for 2,700, again, is about beds and not services needed to get those suffering on the streets out of homelessness. Our unhoused neighbors need more than beds. In some cases, they need rehab, healthcare, dental work, veterinary services, conservatorship, case management, income and skill development, credit counseling, veteran services, legal services, acute care, healthy food, storage space, job training, recruiting, transportation, laundry, and more. They don't need or deserve sheds and jail cells just for the crime of being homeless. Our unhoused neighbors suffering from homelessness need and deserve our care, our love, our compassion, and our hope.